Greetings, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Rare Book Cafe, the coffee break. How are y'all doing? Good afternoon. Well, we happen to be taping for me in the afternoon. We've got our guest from Australia, so we bumped the time up. And of course, my co host, Lee.
Yes, whatever you want to call me, that's fine. I'm here.
And Noel Hart from Down Under.
Hi all. Hi Ed, hi Lee.
Hi.
I heard you had a coffee cup, so we'll wave it just to make it official that this is the coffee break edition of the Rare Book Cafe. You can find us every week, sometimes a couple times a week, on Facebook, on YouTube, and wherever free podcasts are given away. They're out there. Glad for you to check in. Noel Hart, author of And That Was Only the Front Counter. Welcome.
Hi there. How's it all going? I'm doing great down here.
But you did spend some time in the United States?
Correct. I was there for about 15 years. I managed a bookshop in Los Angeles, Cosmopolitan Bookshop, which was located on Melrose Avenue in Hollywood. And I was there for about 10 years. The bookshop itself was in existence for almost 60 years, which was made it one of Los Angeles' one of the longest used bookstores in the city. It was in existence from 1958 to 2015, which was quite a long innings, as they say in cricket talk.
Yeah.
And basically, I was there from the mid-90s to the early 2000s, and I have written a book about my experiences there, which were many.
I got to know, dish the dirt. I mean, you must have seen some, Hollywood type A people come in through the store sometime or another. Give us a little bit of, front page cash register journalism.
Definitely. There were a lot of celebrities that came in and out, everybody from, film directors looking for research purposes, the musicians and writers and artists, and the real creative crew, if you can imagine, was right in the epicenter, right in the midst of the mayhem, as I like to say. And, there were a lot of celebrities that would frequent the establishment. A lot of well-known writers. Eli Goodman, who was the owner of the bookstore, I'll go into it further in detail.
We got a picture of him there, Alan. Put Eli up. Continue.
Eli loves to talk about certain authors. One of his favourites was Aldous Huxley, who was a customer. In fact, one time Huxley there was a fire, which was well documented in his house in the Hollywood Hills, and he actually supplied a lot of the books to replace those damaged volumes, which was quite exciting for Eli, considering he loved Huxley so much. Probably one of the biggest celebrities I dealt with was Michael Jackson, who was a customer, and we helped facilitate his pornography collection, let's say, amongst other things. I won't go into too many details.
Did he bring in an entourage?
You can buy the book. There are details in the book. He came in, usually he'd come in with his chauffeur/bodyguard, but he was actually quite approachable, and it actually seemed quite comfortable in the dense surroundings, which was refreshing to see. It was a real mix of customer base. I mean, we had a celebrity browsing for books in one aisle, a studio decorator renting books, and then the next aisle over there'd be a homeless man sleeping on the floor. So it was just a real mix of it was a real old school bookshop.
All right, I got one more question for you before I turn it over to Lee. Lee and I are obviously used booksellers, rare booksellers, antiquarian booksellers. When you're a bookstore, you're buying books. Otherwise, you can't sell them unless you buy them. And every once in a while, what I call there's an Easter egg, and something comes in out of a 3-box set that's worth 5 figures or more.
True.
Do you remember any one of those specifically?
Yeah. Now Eli, I just must say that Eli would buy any book that came into the store. We were known all over Los Angeles. All the other booksellers knew this. Eli was a glutton for punishment, and because we did a lot of rentals to the studios, we would a lot of the books sometimes would be destroyed on set. There might be a fire or an earthquake or a truck ran into a wall. So for that reason, Eli was justified to take any book in. That's a customer, as we all know, most bookstores are quite selective, so we'll bring in 10 boxes and, they'll pick out 3 or 4 books. Well, Eli would take everything, and he would not only take 10 boxes, he'd ask them if they had more. So, however, sometimes there was the occasion, like for example, one thing comes to mind, a customer once walked in with a signed Jack Kerouac book, which was excerpts of Visions of Cody, which is a signed limited edition. I think it's 750 copies.
Nice.
So this was
My favorite author.
Yeah, well, it was a publisher's out of series copy, which was a special copy. And it was also had a long full-page inscription from Kerouac to Carol and Cassidy, who was an integral part of the whole beat movement.
Oh my goodness.
And the book, Visions of Cody, this is excerpts of Visions of Cody, so it's an abridged version. But Visions of Cody is about Neil Cassidy, which is Carol and Cassidy's husband. So it was quite a good association copy. And the gentleman was not well, and he was a friend of Carolyn's, and she'd given it to him decades earlier, and he just wanted
Excellent story. Excellent.
He sold the book to us for $1,000, which is what he wanted. And at the time we researched it, looked like it was, without the inscription, it looked like it was a $2,000 plus book. Anyway, we ended up buying the book for $1,000, sold it within a week to Heritage Bookshop, which was a rather good bookshop. You might have heard of Heritage. They were just down the road from us, also on Melrose. And we sold it to them within a week for $10,000. And now who knows what they sold it for? Obviously more, So that was a rather good buy.
How it was.
Good.
Heritage is not exactly known for bargain books, so I'm sure they made a nice profit off of it as well.
Well, they said to us, we'll take it on consignment, and if we don't sell it within the week, we'll give you a $10,000 check. Sure enough, 7 days arrived, and so did the check. So, yes.
Well, after you sent us some information, it looks to me like Eli himself may have been the biggest celebrity in all of this. How did he get into the book business? Does this go back generations or?
Okay. No, well, it does to an extent. His father was a bookman of all ilk. Eli grew up in New York. He was born in 1923, so he had a lot of experiences browsing the famous Book Row of New York back in the 30s and 40s, which he loved to talk about. And then he sort of he launched his store in 1958 in Los Angeles, and he was just a book buyer of the old school. He was a Dickensian book buyer. He just loved all kinds of books, and books were his life. And as I say, he would literally buy any book that came in. And not only did we have the books in the store, we also had a warehouse a couple of blocks down, which was the secretive warehouse that nobody was allowed to go to, apart from fortunate few, if you call it.
And you got to remember, this was a time before the internet, right? And the only source was the front door. I mean, the only way to was the front door.
Well, my book was set around the cusp of the internet, so sort of around the late 90s, early 2000s, when a lot of those websites were launched, like Abe and Amazon and Libris, and email for that matter. And it was just a whole new way, as we all know, of approaching selling books, so in a sense, my book is a bit of a sociological snapshot of an era that's now has been changed forever. So,
well, I looked on Facebook, and posts from Cosmopolitan are still up on Facebook. And there were some from, I think, 2013 advertising a 50% off sale. But at the very top of it, it said, truckload of new books just arrived. And so you could see how this constant influx of stuff just kept piling up. What happened to all of the books?
Well, we had a huge amount of stock. With the warehouse, that's sort of key to what happened with the books. There were over 1 million items in that warehouse. Eli used to say there were 250,000 mass market paperbacks upstairs, and he put them upstairs because he thought they weren't as heavy as hardcovers, they wouldn't collapse the floor. But at one point we sold that stock, which was about 1 million items, to a bookseller in Idaho, who unfortunately tragically ended up dying in a car accident a couple of years after that. So I don't know what happened with all those books. Wow. They ended up dispersed all across America, I imagine. But the bookstore, Eli was getting on. He was in his early 90s, and he was getting to the point where he needed to wind things down, obviously. And in the end, we sold a lot of the books. We had huge sales. There was a bookstore called The Last Bookstore, which was quite appropriate, the name. They took a lot of our books and made these wonderful sculptures and tunnels, which are still in existence today. You can go into their store and see those types of books. A lot of them are color-coded and what have you. So, yes.
No, you can't have a book show without talking about books about books. What is there a word for that? Is that bibliophiles? Book lovers who love books about books.
Pretty much.
Do you
yeah.
have any favorites? We on the show this year. I've talked about the two that I read recently. One was the Bookseller of Florence, and the other one was the Badass Librarians of Timbuktu. And now
Okay.
you are going up there in the pantheon of books about books with 84 Charing Cross Road.
Well,
Do you have anything that you modeled this bookstore on, or this story about a bookstore?
Well, I've tried to do a little bit different. I've read a lot of books about books. I'm a real. I often joke there's not enough selling books all day. I want to go home at night and read about other people selling books.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
But I've tried to.
But you did it.
True. A lot of books about books are quite dry, and they're really only for booksellers and people who are so interested in the book business that that's what they would like to read. Whereas I've tried to sort of cross a few barriers there. My book has been described as a good balance between informative and entertaining. So I've tried to sort of, rather than be so dry, I've tried to sort of dampen it up a little bit, let's say, to sort of give it a bit of a wider appeal. So
Good.
And you're going to tell us, I think, how we can get a copy, because I think we're having a
I know. I saw it on
okay.
Facebook.
You know.
Our friend Eddie Nick out in Iowa.
That's true. He's in Wisconsin.
Wisconsin, yes.
Wisconsin, yeah. Eddie Nick's at Driftless Books.
Okay, yeah, we know who that is. Yeah.
He's been on the show
he has
a couple times. Driftless Books.
Yeah, he has it listed on Amazon and eBay.
Veronica, Wisconsin.
He's
Yeah.
only listed it in the last day or so, actually, and he has it available in his store in Wisconsin, but also...
He was only charging $4 for shipping.
That's a bargain. I know I have to charge a little bit
That
more,
is.
unfortunately.
No, that's a problem with us. I get a lot of inquiries from book collectors in Australia, but the shipping is so
It's
high.
just
I mean,
very frustrating.
one
Very
book is a
frustrating.
minimum of $65.
Yeah.
And
And
it
we
can't be
went-
passed.
Frustrating.
Anything
Yeah.
over £3.
We went through a
And it goes
period.
up to $250 real easily.
We went through a period at the beginning of during the pandemic when the U.S. Postal Service was not shipping to Australia, and
Yes, exactly.
you know, and we would get, but I don't think people in Australia were aware of that, because I would get inquiries for books.
Oh, we were aware.
And they would say, "What do you mean you can't ship me this book?" But I did, and this isn't about books, but I had some glass from a specific company on consignment from a longtime book customer of mine several years ago, and out of about 7 pieces, vases and what were called totems, 6 of them sold to Australian customers, which was very interesting. And it was not the same people. You know, it was to a variety
that's
of
great.
people. And it
But
was
you've
on
got an audience
eBay, but
there,
it was kind of a strange occurrence. I noticed. And looking. Oh, you talked about renting books, and you talked about using them on TV shows. And I knew a lady in Atlanta, a dealer in Atlanta, who did that years ago, and she had a warehouse that was just books for rent. And that looks like a really interesting side hustle for a book.
It was a really, it was a unique part of it. Well, not unique, but it was a big part of the business. And the warehouse, we did utilize the warehouse, but unfortunately the warehouse became so full that it was almost impenetrable. I described both Eli's house and the warehouse in my book. Navigating through either or, it was like a morsel of food following the small intestine. It was just so congested, and you could just barely squeeze through the place, and it just became, unmanageable basically, which was unfortunate. But we did do a lot of rentals, both for TV shows and movies. I relate some of these stories in my book. Certain movies like Men in Black or Catch Me If You Can or Red Dragon, which was an interesting one, the prequel of Silence of the Lambs. We sold them like a waist-high stack of psychology journals for going to be used for Hannibal Lecter's personal library. But it's funny because in a lot of these movies you don't actually get to see the books. They're so obscured and almost out of view. They go to these great lengths, the decorators, to fine-tune what they're going to rent, and then the finished product, you can barely even see the books. So It's quite.
I guess
Are
it may help.
are you involved in the book ecosphere down in Australia? Or it's other than the wonderful library you have behind you,
I
and
sell
being an
books.
author, are you somehow other involved in the trade?
Yes, I sell books online. My bookseller name is Bookwood. That's one word, all O's, so you can't get confused with any other vowels. That's Bookwood. And I sell on Abe. I have thousands of books listed on there right now. I'm an online-only bookseller. I've worked in bookshops for decades, but unfortunately, as we all know, they keep closing. So it's I'm an online-only seller now.
You know, one thing that Ed just mentioned about the book ecosystem, we've been talking a good bit on the show about the effect that booksellers can have in the community and doing community outreach and things like that. And so we've been looking for examples of things that booksellers do to further appreciation of books and literacy, you know, in their own community.
Yes, I saw your show recently on Little Libraries, which was great.
Yeah. And so we've been talking about that a good bit as well. But it is always interesting to see the variety of what we as booksellers have and how we approach our business. And I have a very small business that grew out of just my husband and my private collection. He was an English teacher, and
that's where it starts.
And it grew from that. You know, the idea was to get rid of books, and then of course it didn't. And I have continued it, but it's very small. But what I really love is interaction with people like y'all to see what other people, you know, in the book world.
Definitely. And I was going to say before when you mentioned about the customers, but really, to be honest, the real stars of the show were the customers, the wacky collectors, and just the individuals that would frequent the bookshop on a regular basis. They were the real stars of the show. We just had so many oddball, especially in Los Angeles. We just had so many oddball customers. A lot of them were creative souls, but there'd be lots of oddball requests. Like, for example, I've said it's the only bookshop I've ever worked in where we sold magazines to monkeys. And you might ask, well, what do you mean magazines to monkeys? Well, there was a woman who was a chimpanzee trainer at the LA Zoo. And she used to come in and buy magazines, specifically photographic magazines like Colour Photo, like National Geographics, which was great because we normally not get rid of National Geographics, which most booksellers are aware of. But she would come in and buy these National Geographics and stick dried banana chips in there with peanut butter, and the chimps would rifle through the magazines to search for the treats. And in the interim, they would destroy the magazines, of course. So this was we're a constant source of National Geographic magazines for that purpose.
That's interesting. And, you know, even not having an open shop, I get so many people on the phone who want to talk for an hour about their collecting or their books or my books or whatever.
Everybody's proud of it.
And so you still get the interaction. You don't get it like you would in an open shop or that you would at a book fair. But you still get some of that interaction either by phone or by email.
Definitely, which I think is lacking these days in the physical brick and mortar store. The fact that we had such great interaction with customers. It was really, as I say, it was a cultural epicenter, and you just don't get that with the browsing online these days.
No, one last question from me. What about you personally as a collector? Where do your tastes lie? What have you been, you know, into over the years that you were proud that you built up?
Well, I do like books about books, as mentioned earlier, and I'm a bit of a collector. I've got a few hundred of those, but I also collect music books, film, small press poetry. I have a wide variety. As we all know, booksellers tend to, you know, we have wide interests, and you sort of almost have to. It's part of the parcel, isn't it?
That's what makes it so much fun. So, okay, other than Eddie Nicks, is there any other place to purchase your book?
Oh, yes. Okay, Abe. I sell on Abe, ABE Books. Either of my Facebook pages. I have two Facebook pages. One is my bookseller name, which is Bookwood. Again, all O's. That's Bookwood. And otherwise, my name, Noel Hart. I'm on there as my Facebook page there as well. And you can also reach me if you'd like. Email is bookwoodbooks. Again, all O's. bookwoodbooks@yahoo.com.au. Excellent.
You made it easy for us. All O's. But you know, I'm the type of guy that would do zeros. W00D. It doesn't work. I don't know why.
Well, we have really enjoyed having you on, and anytime you'd like to update us on how book sales have been going and anything new that comes along. We're hoping to do the shorter segments so that we can put 2 or 3 a week on. And
that was my big problem. When you said it was 15 minutes, I thought, how am I going to limit
Oh, well, we know.
to 15
We know.
minutes? So what I've done is I've contained them all in my book, and somebody can buy the book.
We're not cutting you off. The producer's cutting us off.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah,
That's
Alan
okay.
keeps a tight rein on us, I think.
Not a problem. I've enjoyed it. It's been great.
And that was only the front counter from Noel Hart. And all right, folks, that's about it for this week. Thank you, Noel Hart from Canberra. Where are you?
I'm in Melbourne, actually.
In Melbourne or
Yes.
Linn from Ridgeback Books.
Just Ridge.
There's Ridge Books.
Just the Ridge.
But where are you folks? Send us a note. You can find us on Instagram, Rare Book Cafe TV. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on YouTube. And you don't even have to look that hard. Bye-bye, everybody. See you
Bye.
next week.